So you're out in the forest, the desert, a deep, deep forest somewhere, wildness, wildlife in general. There's a bear, a tiger, or whatever. You want to capture it, you want to get it all on your camera. But how do you actually go about doing that? What's up guys, I'm host VYEN, and today we're going to be talking about the difference between telephoto and zoom lens. Is there a difference? What is the difference? And what sort of goes on in that process? First and foremost, a zoom and telephoto lens aren't necessarily different. A zoom lens can be a telephoto lens, however, a telephoto lens cannot be a zoom lens all the time. Pretty much a telephoto lens is anything, generally speaking, that's around like something greater than 60 millimeters of a focal length. That means that a zoom lens that's 70 to 200, sort of like this guy, this is actually a 75 to 300, but this is a Canon EF 75 to 300 zoom telephoto lens. Once again, that's just showing that zoom can be telephoto, but telephoto is not always zoom. And where you get into that sort of area, where you get something much more that's just a prime, is something like this guy. Now this, if you are looking at it and you're sort of wondering and trying to figure out what this guy is, this is, first off, this is just an adapter, and this is the actual lens by itself. I just keep it on because I have my lens cap on there with it. This is a Yashica manual film 100 millimeter lens. This is an old lens that I got on eBay for really cheap, and that's something I'm going to go ahead and touch upon. But this is pretty much going to be the basis for my overall telephoto talk for this. I've used other telephoto lenses, but as far as like DSLR specifically, and staying away sort of from cinema cameras in this video specifically, this one's focusing more on the DSLR market and the DSLR lenses that you can go ahead and get for your Lumix camera, your Canon camera, any sort of DSLR you have. I just shouted out Canon and Lumix because that's what I got. A zoom lens pretty much gives you a little bit more versatility. The idea behind a 75 millimeter focal length to a 300 millimeter focal length, much like this EF lens, is that you can go anywhere in between that range, and that gives you a much greater distance. Now this is an EF lens, so I specifically use it for my Canon 600D or T3i, depends on what region you are. I use that for my Canon T3i, which is an APS sensor. That's a crop sensor, so it's not your full 35 millimeter sensor. And if you're even watching this video and you're unfamiliar with those terms, I'll try to break that down real quickly. If you are familiar with that term, then you could just sort of skip these next 30 seconds. But all cameras pretty much are in reference to the old 35 millimeter format. That is the film format that cameras used to be shot on. When everything switched to digital, full frame is sort of what you hear a lot of now. That is the 35 millimeter digital equivalent. Everything aside from that is most of the time lower, but you can also go higher to like medium format, but it's a whole other mess we're not going to talk about. But anything under that is your APS-C, so that's your Canon, usually the Rebel series, T5i, T6i, T3i, what I have. Those are all going to be APS-C, which is just a couple I don't know, inches. It's a smaller, it's a little more cropped in than the regular 35 millimeter. Smaller than that, you'll find in Panasonic, like my Lumix G7 right here, is the Micro Four Thirds, so that's even more cropped in, and so forth and so forth. It goes pretty much, all across the board. You could see tons of videos about that on YouTube. You can find tons of vlogs about that online. So I don't know, I'll link some down below for your convenience, but as far as my video, that's just sort of like the quick mentioning of it. Why that is even relevant is because this lens specifically is an EF lens. That means that if you were to put it on an APS-C camera, it would work as it's intentionally supposed to. However, if you were to plop it onto a full frame Canon camera, you'll notice some vignetting going on because this lens is too small for the full 35 millimeter. Once again, it's for that crop sensor, so you want to make sure that you're using this lens with a crop sensor DSLR. If you're going full frame in the first place, then you're probably going to be looking at something sort of like the L series, or maybe you're going third party with Tamron, Sigma, anything of that sort, Rokinon. There's a whole slew of options all over there. I encourage you to Google around. I encourage you to read up and figure it out on your own. The reason that this guy may be preferred over the actual one that has a fixed focal length and is a prime lens. This guy gives you more versatility. So if you are looking at a subject, or if you're photographing a subject that is only, that isn't too far, or is close, or is extremely far, you can sort of get the all-in-one right here. That means that within the 75mm focal length, you'll probably still have to be far from your subject, but you don't have to be too far. So I actually did take some photos of my girlfriend on her graduation, and I had this lens on because it was getting everything how I wanted it to look. She was in her cap and gown, and I wanted to just get some nice portrait photos of her, and the 75mm did that perfectly for me. However, then at the same time, I was able to go ahead and zoom all the way in to get her on the stage, to get her accepting her letter, and I was able to get all that with here. So much more increased versatility. That's why you might choose a zoom lens versus a fixed focal telephoto lens. But a telephoto lens, much like this guy right here, will give you much more of a clearer image. It'll give you a little bit more of a crisper image. For this lens, really, I haven't used this one for photos too much. I've mostly utilized this in a gig I had in Springfield, where there was a couple speakers on stage, and I was pretty much all the way back, and I wanted to capture like sort of the whole room as well as the speaker, and swapping between a wide angled lens, which was my Canon, with what I have on there. I think I have my Canon 24 or 28, is it 28? I have my Canon 24mm lens to go ahead and capture sort of the whole room, and then I would switch over to my Lumix, which is what I'm filming on now, and I switched over to this 135mm telephoto lens. With that being said though, this isn't a lens, this is once again the 135 prime. With this being a manual lens, a film lens, that means you're not going to get a lot of the features that you get with something like this, which is a digital lens. One of the biggest things, obviously, easily to talk about is autofocus. You're not going to get the autofocus features that you get with a digital lens, with a manual lens. Mostly use my film manual lens with the Lumix camera because Lumix has peaking. Peaking is pretty much outlines that go ahead and show the focus of your subject and whether or not they're actually in focus. So I use that feature to go ahead and show me if the speaker was in focus, if the stage was in focus, if the sign was in focus. I use that feature a lot, and it really made using the manual lens something practical and a lot less gimmicky, but something I could actually use in the moment, and it was great. It was awesome. Overall, really enjoy the experience of both. There's obviously two different sort of like areas that I'm trying to attack here. Two different sort of areas, one being the photo and one being the video. The video aspect wise, you're gonna need something that's sort of in a fixed location if you're using that manual telephoto lens like I was. But for me, it was really easy because it was mostly a speaker who was standing behind the podium. It was mostly a speaker that was standing behind the podium, not moving much. So all I had to do was go ahead and unlock my focus, make sure that those blue peaking lines were staying, on their face, on their eye, everything of that sort. And as long as that focus was there, then I knew that I was good to go. Canon wise, I don't have peaking, but as long as, that's more of an eyeball, and then locking focus, and then just making sure that it's good to go there. And that's all on the video side. For photography specifically, one of the reasons you wouldn't want to use this, you could use this if you have like one subject, a model, someone who's just standing there waiting for you to take their picture. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to try to like capture a squirrel really fast, or capture a bird with his wings like spread out. It's going to be more difficult to capture things like that because this doesn't have your autofocus features. And then this is a very practical moment where you need to lock onto a subject, that subject being the animal, lock on real quick and just keep clicking your shutter until your camera can't click no more. And then you go ahead and look at your pictures and you're like, oh, I got 3 great ones and a bunch of other ones that are blurry or something like that. Not very possible with a manual lens. However, other telephoto lenses will have that. When you see sports photographers and whatnot, when they got their giant like setup, and it's like 80% of their whole setup is like lens, and then the last 20% is just this tiny little camera. those are telephoto lenses. Those are lenses that are going to get you those crisp images. They're going to separate the actual subject from the background. They're going to make it like pop more, and that's all stuff that you're going to get more with the digital lenses. All in all, you know, that's sort of the photography aspect. That's the video aspect. I try to provide you as much examples as possible from real work that I've done, and from this point on, you know, you pretty much just gotta look it up yourself. I just wanted to talk about this video, wanted to share about it. I know there's been a bunch of YouTube channels that have definitely helped me in my search to get gear, in my search to look for lenses and to figure it all out. If you like this video, please leave a like, and if you want to see more about it, if you want me to dive deeper into any of the things that I talked about, I know I went on a few tangents during this, but if you want to hear me talk about anything specifically in one specific video of any of those tangents, let me know in the comments down below. Once again, my name is Josue and I live in Chicago, the greatest city in the world. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye.